I would spend hours talking on the phone with my friends growing up. Right? The only deterrent I had from talking more was that we had a landline, and therefore I couldn't get away from my parents. Now, eventually, I upgraded to a cordless phone, which meant that I could speak for more hours on the phone because I could wander to another room and shut the door. But imagine if I had a cell phone, right? That would have been superior because there would have been no limits to my wandering. Well, as we dive into Acts chapter 2 today, I'm going to show you why a cell phone is superior to a landline, and it may just be for reasons that you haven't thought of. So Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a sound like a blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now, God's presence had always been something that had dwelt out there somewhere in a building. Right, we see many instances when people were approaching God's presence, there were outward signs like fire or rituals of washing to purify them. Well, here in Acts 2, Jesus' promise is fulfilled by the coming of the Holy Spirit. The very presence of God now is no longer found in a building or a location, but within his new temples. Right? And that is why there is the physical manifestation of fire, which signifies the purifying and refining of a dwelling place for God. He now takes up residence within us to assure us that we belong to him, as well as to empower us for mission. Now, rather than the presence of God being stationary and people having to come to him, the presence of God is now mobile, and he goes to them. And just as Jesus came and sought after those who were lost and needed saving, so now we as his followers do the same with his very presence living inside of us. Now, the way he goes to them is through us, who are now his mobile temples, who are witnesses of what Christ has done. Right? So when it comes to being witnesses, we are meant to be like cell phones that roam, not landlines that are stationary. In this specific instance, as the Holy Spirit comes upon these followers of Jesus, they begin to speak in other known languages. Since people have come to Jerusalem for a feast, you have people all over the world present, and therefore they are hearing the works of God declared in their native tongue. And guess what is happening? They are going back home and declaring what they heard, and thus they are being witnesses, and the word is spreading from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the uttermost parts of the earth. It's like all these smooth stones have been cast into the water, and with it ripples throughout the entire world. So I want to ask you this question. Would you describe yourself, and when it comes to being a witness, more as a cell phone or as a landline?